Just a very quick introduction that I'm Jools Walker, also known as Lady Fellow. I'm the author of the book Back in the Frame, co-founder of the Women of Colour Cycling Collective with Jenni, who you heard not too long ago, and your host for this afternoon's discussion. Now, today we have an amazing panel of women up here to speak on building communities. And we're going to be talking about how to build safe and inclusive and diverse spaces in cycling. So our goal or purpose for this panel today is, no matter what your role is in the industry, and I'm kind of hesitant to use the word industry because that feels a bit sort of like marketing, but you'll come away from this panel talk with practical takeaways that you'll be able to put into action. So be it a new idea or a fresh perspective on how you can build these kind of communities, this is what we would like to be able to impart over to you for this panel talk. Now, we're hoping that this incredible mix of lived experiences that we have of the women on this panel who are all involved in cycling, discussing how do you equip people with the tools on how to go about building these spaces will inspire you, and I'm sure the rest of the whole weekend will inspire you in regards to how to make positive changes in the cycling scene. So a little expectation of what we've got coming up. Just going to take a few moments to introduce all of the panellists and tell you a bit about their backgrounds in cycling and community building. Some of them have already done this excellently with their speeches and talks that they've given, but we'll just do that again. And then we'll kick off the conversation, asking some questions in regards to drawing out the themes of community building. And then after the panel, we should have time to open up the floor, which will give you an opportunity to ask some questions. And of course, you'll be able to speak with all of the panellists, hopefully, with the lunch break that follows this as well. If you are doing social media at the moment as well, the hashtag is there, so please get involved, have a think about the questions that you would like to ask. If you don't get a chance, you will be able to speak to us at lunch. So I'm hoping that sounds good to you. Yeah? Excellent. So let's get into it. So, our first panellist that I'm going to be introducing you to is Biola Babawale.
Hi everyone.
Now, Biola only started cycling in 2018, but she immersed herself in the cycling community, showing great enthusiasm for her own progression and that of other women too. Now, Biola is the chair of a London-based cycling group, Velocity, which is a club for all women, including transgender, intersex and cis, as well as trans men and non-binary people. Now, aware or highly aware of the hurdles to join cycling clubs, Biola works hard alongside the wider community to reduce barriers within Velocity. Now, the result is a club that is more accessible for women, trans and non-binary people of colour, and as disability-friendly as possible, and still constantly challenging itself to improve. Now, Biola has also gone on to set up Cycle Together, which was created to help achieve the same goal, which is helping more people of all ages, backgrounds and cultures to get cycling in their local clubs and groups. So welcome, Biola.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Next we have Cheryl Reid, who is the president of the Cowley Road Condor Cycling Club. I think a few may be here today. And, as stated, a loud laugh enthusiast as well. I've heard it in Greenland, your life is amazing. Now, Cheryl went from years of commuting to joining a cycling club and trying all sorts of fun things, including running one. Now, Cheryl loves long distance, tea, snacks, and getting the sleeveless out. So, you're on your sleeveless already, so welcome, Cheryl. Now, not too long heard from her, but we have Jenni Gwiazdowski, who is the director, mechanic, author, and entrepreneur. Jenni is the co-director of the London Bike Kitchen, a DIY bike shop that opened its doors in 2012 to teach home mechanic bike maintenance both in person and online. And Jenni is one half of the Wheel Suckers podcast with Alex Davis of Look Mum No Hands. Jenni also helped set up London Bike Kitchen's Women and Gender Variant Night. I can't get that image of Victoria Beckham and the Rooney in the bike shop, by the way. And co-founded the Women of Colour Cycling Collective. Now these were 2 stepping stones to help marginalised people get back into cycling. Now Jenni has written the instructional book How to Build a Bike and is currently working on book 2, which is very exciting. Jenni's face, having thoughts about that. So as we've seen with Jenni, it's probably very safe to say that she really does like bikes and believes that cycling will save the world. So welcome to Jenni. And next we have Jaskowska. Now Elle grew up roaming the Welsh hills and first discovered bicycles at university when she was looking to take her procrastination to the next level. Elle started the School of Rocks, which is a women-led community empowering other women to get into off-road cycling. And she started it last year when she saw her friends struggling to find their flow with off-road riding. Now, School of Rocks has since grown into a network of schools across the UK and now spreading to the Netherlands and the USA. So congratulations on that. A little round of applause for Elle. And you just heard her, she's joining us again, Vedangi Kulkarni. So Vedangi is an adventure traveller, endurance athlete, public speaker, writer, expedition manager and a business owner. In 2018, she rode 29,000 kilometres around the world in 160 days, mostly solo as well.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah, and unsupported, and at the age of around 19 or 20, you became the youngest woman to circumnavigate the globe on a bike. Which is pretty amazing. Now, Vedangi is always keen for an adventure, be it cold water swimming, long distance hiking or cycling, climbing or mountain biking, or skiing, or travelling through remote places. Now, her happy place is anywhere outside, in the wild and on the move. She loves to write about bikepacking, mountain biking, and just about anything adventurous. So that is our panel for this half. So the first question I would like to pose to you all is, how did you start your communities and groups? So Biola, I may start with you first on this one. Like, how did it come about with starting up Cycling Together?
So yes,
We have to do the pass the mics.
thank you so much. So Cycle Together first started from one of my good friends who was looking to find a group to help her get into cycling. And she was basically struggling. She kind of did a Google search, put in cycling clubs near me, and basically went along to a couple of groups and found that she was just trying to get into cycling, but a lot of the clubs has put in minimum requirements. So you need to be able to ride a certain level, you need to be able to use clip-in cleats, and for new cyclists, she had no idea what on earth is a cleat. And then she kind of went along to these groups, and they were very welcoming, but at the same time there was this expectation of a level of knowledge. So one of the reasons why I set up Cycle Together was to just basically elevate more groups which are in people's local areas, to highlight, there's initiatives which are being started up to try and get more people cycling, and people definitely in marginalised groups to cycle within their groups. But a lot of these groups are kind of hidden. If you're in the kind of Instagram sphere, you kind of tick along and then you find them. But if you're not, then it's quite hard to find these groups. So the idea was to try and remove that social media hurdle and actually elevate those groups and make it easier on the big wide web to find these groups. And also, especially for that beginner cyclist or that cyclist from a marginalised group. So my friend is half Iranian, a woman of colour, if you're a person with disabilities, etc., to highlight those groups which are out there which can help you get into cycling. And that was kind of the main push, the drive behind setting up Cycle Together. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'm going to shout so that it's easier for you to pass the microphone instead of me just running across and getting it. So yeah, if you can hear me, then excellent. Right, loud Jools is in the building. So Cheryl, what about you with the consoles?
Yeah, so for people who aren't aware, the Cowley Road Condors, we're based here in Oxford. We're mostly road, but we do a bit of off as well. So we're a mixed cycling club, men and women. And right now, at this moment, we have over 300 members, and over 100 of those are women. That's over a third. And that's really, really unusual. And that is as a result of some of the hard work that we have put in over the years. So we're a young club. I think that helps as well. We kind of make ideas and go, as we go along. So when I joined the club, I was about 3 years old when I joined. Maybe about 20 women, I would say, at that time. And I was often one of the very slowest on the rides, and the women at that time who were coming along for rides were quite sporty, quite racy, quite fast. I would lead from the back, and I remember riding with one girl who said, it's a shame there aren't, it's kind of like a stepping stone to get into the club. So to be able to ride with our kind of social rides, you need to be able to ride for a couple of hours generally. And they felt like there was a gap there. And whilst there is also excellent cycling provision in Oxford, so ISIS Ladies, for anyone here who's aware of that, that's another group of female cyclists here, which is excellent. So they're a bit slower, hybrids, shorter rides generally. We were looking for a kind of stepping stone to help people. So reflecting what she said, I had an idea. I needed some support to help get this off the ground. Jo Lancaster, who's organised today over there, said that she would help me. And our idea was to run something at the time we called spring sessions and summer sessions. So it was like an 8-week block. So once a week, we'd take women out on rides, women only. And each week it would get longer and maybe a bit hillier. And each week we would have a topic that we would talk about. So it might be gears, it might be nutrition. We also worked with the Broken Spoke as well to come along and help run sessions on fixing flat to try and give people confidence in fixing mechanicals. So we did that, took people through the 8-week block, and many of them ended up joining and riding regularly with, sorry this is going on so long, but I think there might be some useful stuff here. So that was back in 2015, and each year since we've run iterations. Many people here have been involved, organising, leading rides, and trying to just work out what works, what doesn't work. For example, 8 weeks actually don't need 8 weeks. You can do it in 4. It's actually more about confidence, and people are more than capable to come out on club rides with us. It's just getting over that first hurdle, saying, don't worry, you're fine. You are fast enough. That is the number one thing I hear from women, is they're worried that they're not going to be quick enough to keep up, and they're like they might be left behind. So all our social rides are non-drop. So we promise we'll not leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere, and we'll make sure you get home safe. So over the years we've kind of tinkered with it, different times of year, different days, just trying to work out what works best for people. And we've got a good formula now, and we keep running it because we want more women to come to the club and have, you know, the experience of riding with others and having a good time. So that's why I'm here today, is to kind of share that message about some of the stuff we've done. I'm very happy to talk more about, sorry, rambling on, but, you know, if people want to come and talk to me afterwards about stuff, quite often people come to me and they say, oh, what have you, you've got so many women, it's amazing, what magic, what voodoo is this? And you're like, it's not rocket science, it's about saying to women, we will run slower rides, you will come along, you will have a great time, you will feel empowered, you will come back. Quite often, and I've been cycling for 20 years now, you know, pretty decent at it. Nearly always people come along and they're faster than me. It's such a confidence thing. So, yes, I think I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you.
Jenni, I know you were just touching upon that with your talk as well. If there was anything else that you wanted to add in regards to why you started the communities and the groups that you did with, obviously, London Bike Kitchen, with the WAG evenings, and then obviously with the Women of Colour Cycling Collective as well.
I was going to say mine could be really short, so we can combine. Because I feel like I did touch on like the how, but yeah. I guess the why is always, you see an issue and you're like, you know what, I think I can do something about this, and then just doing it and not being held back by it's not my place to do something, or I can't find a way to do something. It's like using your imagination. It's problem solving. I love it. Like that's one of the reasons why I'm a mechanic, because every day is a different puzzle to solve. So if you, as an aside, if you are someone who enjoys fixing things with your hand. Knitters make really good wheel builders. Just saying. But there's a lot of crossover. Anyway, that's an aside. But like when I like solving problems. So if you see an issue, if you see a niche, fill it. Like just try. Don't stop. Experiment. Like that's one of the big things. Is like it's not a mistake. It's just a lesson, and move on from that.
Oh, with School of Rocks as well. So that was last year that started, and now you have like, is it international schools, international chapters? Is schools the best way to describe it?
Yeah, so I didn't set out to do that. It all kind of happened by a happy accident. So I actually started my cycling journey going along to the Women's Summer Sessions run by Jo and Cheryl. And I think that kind of planted the seed for me that sometimes when something feels big and daunting, breaking it down into some really easily achievable steps that you can go, yeah, I did that, I achieved something, celebrating it, and then building on it can be really, really powerful. And so, yeah, like you said in my intro, I saw my friends, and there's this big gravel, people being sold this dream of gravel cycling, and it's going to be amazing, and then the reality is they're like in a bush, or they're sort of stood at the top of some intimidating rocky descent, thinking, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't just stolen that route off the internet. Or their partner takes them out for a ride and they cry and they have an argument, and you think, this isn't quite the dream of adventure cycling that I was sold when I bought this fully GRX whatever bike that I don't understand. And so I saw this in my friends and I thought, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of that magic that the Condors had, and I'm just going to break down adventure cycling, off-road cycling, whatever you want to call it, into some easy steps. And so the first ride, we just did some like national cycle routes, flat, princess gravel, maybe some of us like to call it. And we were just chatting and laughing and having a good time, and so people didn't even realise that they were doing a gravel ride, And then each week slowly introducing a new element, whether that was a little bit of single track, a little bit of loose descending, a rocky climb, and maybe a river crossing, or and just adding everything slowly, gently. Again, no drop. We take our time, and people started messaging me on the internet, being like, "I wish we had that in Edinburgh. I wish we had that in Cardiff." And I thought, well, there's no reason why you can't. And so actually, what I'd come up with is what we call the curriculum, and that is a toolkit for learning confidence and feeling like you belong. The idea is when you finish the curriculum, you graduate, and then you're set on your merry journey to do whatever you want. But you've graduated. You belong. You can go and turn up. You can stay in these women-led spaces if that's where you feel comfortable, or go and infiltrate. Go into those, get into these other spaces and show them what they're missing out on. But also, it was a toolkit for building community, and it gave people a blueprint. So people who were like, "Oh, I'm not the best cyclist I've ever met. I couldn't possibly start a community." And it's like, yes, you can. Here are the tools. And actually, sometimes the best teachers are not the best cyclists we've ever met. And also, you don't have to be everything to all people. Some of our most successful schools, they're teams of 2 to 3 women or non-binary ride leaders, and one of them will be a whiz. So Bath is like a perfect example. We've got Liz, who's like a qualified coach. She's full of confidence, full of advice. And then we've got Claire, who is, a nervous descender by her own admission. And so people see that and they're like, oh, I don't have to be the most confident rider. But Claire's also brilliant at communications, and she can fix a puncture without a tyre lever, just with her bare hands. And she's great at route planning. And so these two together, they're like the perfect team. And again, I think this is one of the things that you were talking a little bit about, these kind of patriarchal white male structures, and the idea that you have to be to be a leader, you have to be the best person, full of confidence, and one person. And actually, where is the truth in that? Where is the evidence? So the community actually happened by accident, and I don't really know how I would say, oh yeah, this is, these are the steps, you need to do it. But sometimes that is a happy accident, and it's one of the really powerful things is we have this toolkit, this blueprint. It's available online, and anyone can take it, and they don't have to stick to it. You know your community, you know where you live, you know the people who live there, you know how mature, the scene, or whatever better word is, in that area, and you take this thing and you make it your own. And so it's so cool to see these little groups pop up all over the place with their own identities, their own personalities, their different ways of doing things, and it's just like, wow, I could not have done that by myself. And so it's like that thing about, you build it, you make these tools, and then you just set it off into the world, and you're just like, that, it is just amazing, and it's magic.
So, I was going to... So Vedangi, I was going to ask what that looks like for you in the mountain biking scene as well, because just in the talk you were saying that you don't... Did you say that you don't know how to make it happen? But you're here, you're doing the public speaking, you're speaking to all of us about it, so you are making it happen, your presence is making that happen.
I think on this occasion, so basically, I think it's not about knowing exactly, as Elle said, it's not about knowing exactly the steps, it's about the problem solving, as Jenni said. You see a problem and you think about, would I like to exist in a different world than I'm already in? And I have this phrase in Marathi from a song written on my softboard at home, and it says "Karmata's jnanaचे सार्थक," and it means like you can have all the knowledge in the world, you can know the right things, but unless you actually do something about what you see, unless you decide that you want to make some sort of change in what you see, then it's actually going to happen. You're going to take those steps. And I think, at least with the mountain bike races, it was more than anything, it was me feeling extremely I felt very strong emotions about Casey's accident. Like, I sat there thinking, this can be literally anybody that I know, that I love, that I'm friends with, it can be me. And if I want to exist in a space where my presence is accepted and I'm allowed to race, and there's space for that, and if I can still feel welcome, then why not? And also I had I had an incredible example of Nicola, who's also here. She started New Forest Off-Road Club when she turned up at Wood Cyclery asking for any women's rides that are led, and there weren't any. And that's how she actually started. And I after buying a jumper off of her, we ended up riding together, and I found out more about it and how she did it. And with Casey's accident and the whole situation, I remember thinking, what if I can organize a race where it is friendly, where the email about the race doesn't just say, this is where the race is happening, this is the main kind of highlights, this is the track, talk to me if you need anything. I wanted more than that, and I learned a lot about that from those around me, about how to actually make it friendly. And I suppose, I think that's the only thing that I added to the scene, was to make it friendly, make it sound better than it actually might be in some cases, and easier than it is in some cases, because we turn up in places thinking I should not be here, but then we actually get on a bike and start riding it, and we realize, oh, we're actually doing it. It's happening. So that can be applicable in so many different situations.
Well, this leads nicely into what I wanted to ask you all as well in regards to why it's actually important to build these spaces. So, you know, we're touching on the fact that it's important to have those kind of safe spaces where you feel welcome and you know that there's no such thing as a silly question and the information is going to be readily available to you to be part of this. So, yeah, I was going to ask, like, why is it important, do you feel, to build these spaces and these different spaces as well within cycling communities? Who would like to?
I can go first.
Go for it.
Thank you. So one of the things which has been quite incredible setting up Cycle Together is that I've set it up with my brother, who is a doctor. Now, I'm kind of coming at this question from a bit of a different perspective, because at the end of the day, in this audience, we all know the statistics around participation and the participation gaps between different marginalised groups. Now, for me and for my brother, and just seeing it through his lens, is the implications of that participation gap. So the importance of these safe spaces is to try and reduce that participation gap, get more people basically participating and being part of the cycling world. Now, from his perspective, it's really around health outcomes. So when you think about the importance of doing sports, exercise, you know, you can think about the implications in terms of cancer rates, in terms of health outcomes, in terms of preventable diseases, which are caused by more sedentary lifestyles. And for me, that's one of the implications, the importance of having these safe spaces. And then when you kind of come back, take a step back to, you know, your question, which you talked about, the importance of having spaces to ask questions. It's also important to be able to feel like you can see people who look like you. So a little bit about my background is I grew up in South London, in Brixton. I still live in Brixton, and that's where I ride. So when I'm going, sometimes when I'm cycling, I will be in, you know, love it or hate it, but I love a bit of light from me. I feel great in it. I do. You know I do, Kitty. You know I do.
There's stories.
I feel great in it. But it's such an unusual sight in South London. So I'll be, maybe if I stop at traffic lights or I'm riding, the number of women of colour who will be in their cars or walking along who will be like, oh, I didn't, oh, wow, I've never seen that before. And because it's South London, everyone loves a comment. So they'd be like, oh, so is it safe? You must be really fit. But like, did you ride that bike? I was like, well, you can see I'm riding it. And it's just so, the mind boggles. And for me, that's symptomatic of the importance of these safe spaces, the importance of being able to challenge the idea that it shouldn't be unusual to see a woman of colour. And I'm just also, this is applicable to other marginalised groups. It shouldn't be unusual to see people who are older adults. It shouldn't be unusual for people who are trans, etc., to be out exercising and to be out on the road. And I think by creating those safe spaces, you normalise the idea that more people can be doing sport, more people should be active, but also when I started those health outcomes, there's a serious implication to having a sedentary lifestyle, and that is borne out in the statistics around health outcomes, etc. So, you know, it's important that we come away with this with a nice warm feeling, but I think there is an urgency about this as well. Those are my thoughts.
I was going to hop in with that as well, and I was going to sort of bring Jenni into this also, just in regards to, because I've got this here, seeing yourself reflected in cycling spaces is so important, because you must have all heard the phrase, if you can't see it, how are you expected to be it? So creating those kind of reflections within cycling is really important. And I know, Jenni, with what, you know, done with the Women of Colour Cycling Collective, obviously the WAG evenings that you have as well, like what has been the takeaway from that for you, for those groups, and what that's meant to the people who have ended up coming along to them, like feeling like they have that safe space?
When you first asked this question, the first thing that popped into my head was self-care, because when you're out in the world and you are in a space where you immediately feel like you don't belong, that you shrink, like you get small, really don't feel good. It helps you bloom. It gives you hope. It creates possibilities. Like, I don't have this one set path for me. Like, I can do anything I want. Look at all these other people doing these different things that no one was doing before. And it just, it comes back to like taking care of yourself as well. Like, you have to nurture yourself in your life. I don't know, I feel it's a bit emotional about this because I also feel like when you're the person running these spaces, we have to be careful to look after ourselves as well, because it can be really draining and really powerful at the same time. So like being here, I feel like is a form of self-care because we're in a really positive environment. This is a space where ideas and change is going to happen, which is very exciting. But it's also very nourishing, and you can look after yourself a bit better in that sense. But yeah, that's how I view the spaces that we are creating. Is like we're creating, like Vedangi mentioned, it's creating the world that you want to see.
Anyone else have anything to add on that?
So I don't know if it's just the impact of being back in a lecture theatre, but I was reminded of some A-level chemistry. Kitty, you're going to play along here. So does anybody remember from school, and people would talk about catalysts, and how a catalyst would reduce the activation energy required to make a reaction happen? Sorry, I was going to take it there, but I do think that is the difference for a community. When you have these marginalised groups and you have stories and people and all of society saying, "Oh, you sure you're going to do that? It's going to be dangerous," or "You're brave," "You're weird," or or "You can't see it." Actually, that community, when there are all of these gatekeepers and barriers and people saying, "You don't belong here," "You look like you belong here," "Why do you even turn up?" And actually, with things like touring and off-road cycling, where there's so many layers of information, of knowledge, where to go, who to go with, how to approach something, how to problem solve, how to fix your bike. That's so daunting. And actually being the whole point, I think, of community is that if you don't personally know someone, if you don't personally have a best friend, a partner, an older sibling, a parent, a guardian, somebody to take you under their wing, then how are you going to get into this nebulous world that's quite scary? And I do think that, this was kind of one of the reasons why I wanted School of Rocks to be scalable, because if we rely on word of mouth and knowing someone or having a sibling, then like the scale of the pace of change, it's going to be linear. It's going to be one person brings in one person, you have two people. They bring in a person, and it's linear and it's really slow. Whereas if each person brings along 10 people, and that's what community does. It creates exponential growth and change, and that's why it's important. Because if we want to create the world that we want to live in, we want people to party with, right? You're supposed to whoop.
I might have something.
Yeah?
Just on the benefits of creating these kind of spaces, I think I'll come at it from a slightly different angle. So we talked about the benefits for the people in those safe spaces, but I think it's a bit wider than that. And if I give an example from our mixed cycling club view, so there have been periods in the past when there's been some racing competitions happening, and men would go off separately and train together, and women would go off separately and train together. And we got a lot of feedback, particularly from the men actually, that they missed having the women on the group rides, that the vibe was quite different. It was more testosterone, if you like, and they really liked the kind of mix. They missed the women, they wanted them back. When they got them back, it was much more kind of relaxed, jovial, enjoyable for everyone involved. So I think whilst we're talking about creating safe spaces for marginalised group, I think it benefits everyone in the community, actually.
I think for me, like the word is intimidating, and what makes spaces intimidating. And I think in terms of mountain biking, for example, like when it came to organizing the race, the question that was asked, that will I be able to go down that track? And it's a very fair question, and even someone who's a very experienced mountain biker would have it. They would turn up somewhere and wonder if they're with their friends, if they will be ridiculed for not being able to make it down a certain, probably slightly challenging segment or something. And so with the races, the reason it was important to not just organize it in the first place, but also do it in a certain way. So adapted bikes race the same track that two-wheeled mountain bikes do. One of the reasons for that was that it doesn't just have to be inclusive. Okay, no. The idea was that to make a space inclusive, it does not need to be dumbed down. And everything that I'm planning to even do here on, it's all around that particular thing. It's that to make a space inclusive, it does not need to be dumbed down. And how is kind of what, just trying to work that out at the moment. But that was what I wanted to see more of in mountain biking, especially because there is a lot in gravel that's happening right now, which is very much that. But in mountain biking especially, there aren't many spaces where you can go in and just expect that someone will show you how to do that drop, unless you know that person. And, so yeah, I think that was kind of what I can add to the conversation.
No, that's a really interesting point, because as we're talking about building these communities, obviously a lot of communities tend to be centred around group rides, and I know during the break I was ended up talking to some women about the highs and lows of group rides as well, because it can be difficult. Like if you're finding yourself in a group wondering, am I fast enough? Am I fit enough? Will I be able to keep up with this? Meeting groups of people can actually be really intimidating as well if you have social anxiety, neurodiverse people as well. When you're taking all of these things need to be taken into considerations, and it has to be said sometimes that doesn't always happen. So what do we need to do in regards to checking in with ourselves to make sure that we are creating the spaces that all folks need?
I don't mind taking something on that. So I know one of the couple of things that we've tried to do to make life a bit easier on that front. For example, when we start our women's rides, when we're doing that particular series, we start them earlier than the main group rides, so people have a chance to meet together, and before all the hordes of cyclists turn up for the normal club rides, and then having smaller groups as well, and then ride leaders across the weeks. We try to get people to come more than once, so it's familiar faces every time you go, so it's not as intimidating. And then towards the end, we run what we call graduation rides, which is introducing people to normal club rides, what those look like, and talk about them in advance and have drinks afterwards and stuff. But no, it's an excellent point, and I think there are ways to approach it. So those are just a couple of examples.
Thank you. I can answer that as well with two hats on. One hat being chair of Velocity Posse, and then the second one being founder of Cycle Together. So chair of Velocity Posse, one of our, if you like, our USPs is that we don't focus on group rides. Actually, what we focus on is slow skill sessions. One of the reasons why we do that is because they're a fantastic leveler. So you don't have to be incredibly fit or, have this high level of cycling experience. Actually, all you need to do is have two wheels, and actually even that's not even a must, because when I turned up to my first slow skill sessions, I didn't have a bike. So, not a prerequisite. But coming along, you have a mixed ability group, racers along with commuters, along with people who are new to riding, And the idea is a focus on bike handling. So one of the kind of the mottos and things that we say to each other is that there's no point in going fast if you're going fast without control. So the focus is slowing things down, and you'll be amazed by slowing things down or how much that challenges your ability to handle your bike. So that's the first aspect. Then secondly, when it comes to kind of group rides, similarly we try to start off our introductory rides in a park. So first of all, getting used to group riding, and before we start taking people out onto kind of the main roads in Essex, that we felt that that's quite an important stepping stone. First of all, just to meet who you'll be riding with, gain that confidence, understand a bit more about kind of group riding skills, but also that etiquette. So some of the things that we've talked about a little bit is sometimes how impenetrable that knowledge, that expected knowledge is before you start cycling. So the idea of starting in a park, you can come along with any bike. You don't need to be clipped in, trainers, whatever. Come along, ask any questions, or don't even come with a bike. Just come for the coffee and just ask all your questions before we go on a ride. And then just moving a little bit over to Cycle Together, one of the things that, we Cycle Together is a search engine, it's a club finder, but we do a bit more than that. So you have your club finders, like the one in British Cycling or the one in Cycling UK. The reason why I kind of highlight that is that with Cycle Together, the emphasis is not necessarily on the disciplines, but it's the manner in which you ride. So, for example, talking about minimum speeds, talking about equipment you might need to go on a bike ride, but delving a little bit deeper, which is really trying to focus on the environment, the culture within a club, those intangible things which makes people want to kind of turn up and try their first kind of bike ride before you even go on to actually go on the first ride. And we felt one of the things that we did was that we talked to a lot of cycling clubs and cycling groups about what are those kind of hurdles before going on a group ride. And one of the things that came across is just not knowing who you're going to meet on that first ride. What's the environment going to be like? And so that's kind of, for me, one of the, when we think about building these communities, lowering those hurdles for your first group ride, that's kind of that intangible information which is needed which people might have questions about before they actually even go on that ride, which I think is really important to bring out.
Yeah, I just got that. Yeah, even something simple like on your website saying what to expect for your first ride. You don't need a bike clock. People turn up with massive D-locks because they think we're going to leave bikes unattended somewhere and they're going to get stolen, which doesn't happen ever, So having kind of rundown of, you might want to bring a banana, have a helmet on, that would be great, simple stuff like that, so that people, before they turn up to an intimidating space, can have an idea of what to expect, and that will just help them feel a bit more confident going in, I think.
Because it may seem like something small, even just to say things like, don't bring the lock, bring a banana, have a helmet with you. It's the importance of making sure that those very first touch points that people have are welcoming and inclusive and give the information. Because that's, for me, that's the difference between, am I going to turn up to this or not? If it doesn't feel like I'm getting what even just the first line of that could be so much, like, in regards to making that decision to going. So it's just even that level of clarity and welcomingness is essential.
Yeah, and one more thing, I think, so when you're kind of advertising what it is that you're offering, most people have some sort of online presence, be that a website or a social media platform. It's like, what are you putting on there? What does it look like? Do the people looking at it, can they see it and see themselves in that? And that's really key. And I know we whilst we have a lot of women on our website, for example, a lot of them are white. I'd like to change that. A lot of them look quite youngish as well. I'd like to change that. But it's about trying to project an image that people, when they look at your socials, go, I think I would feel welcome there. And that's so important, that kind of shop window, if you like, I think.
I think, so I'm also a steward at New Forest Off Road Club, and kind of, so all the rides are multiple ride leaders, and something I was thinking about is like, one of the first rides. So I used to be one of the ride leaders before I moved to Inverness, and I always found that many of the times, if you're the only person turning up, so you're turning up to a group ride alone, basically. I think the job of the ride leader doesn't just become navigating or it's not just kind of talking to the person who's the fastest or up ahead. I think one of the reasons we had introduced having more than just one ride leader was also having someone at the back. So if there's a long climb and someone's trailing, there's someone also chatting to you and you're not feeling like you're being left behind. And I think one of the reasons people feel intimidated by group spaces isn't just who you're going to meet and what it's going to be like. It's also, am I going to be left behind and forgotten about? And that was my first experience of doing a group ride in Inverness, actually, when I went, it was actually on a man biking trails close to where I live. And I turned up going, I have all this New Forest of Road Club energy, I'm going to channel all of it on this man bike ride. And it was a group ride, and I turned up, there was 7 hunky guys with really cool mountain bikes, and I was like, oh my god, I do not belong here. Turned up 5 minutes before time because I was like, you know what, gotta be professional, if I'm making friends, it would be nice not to make a bad impression by turning up late or something. And basically, as we set off, there was no introduction, none of that. It was like no one even asked me who I was. It was not. There was like no kind of, oh, are you with us? Like there was not like there was no clear communication of, okay, we're meeting here. This person will be there. This other person will also be there. We will all talk about, we'll very briefly introduce, and yeah, like this is where the ride's going or whatever. And on the climb, so the climb is like known for being really long and hard. And I was probably like a fair few minutes, probably like 5 minutes behind everyone. And I turned up and everyone had already gone down the trail. And whilst they were overtaking, they were making small talk and being like, oh yeah, you've moved here from Bournemouth. Oh wow, like must be quite hilly for you right now. But no one actually bothered to, stop and make some sort of conversation. And I didn't go for another ride again, also like the first trail we did, everyone was like, the first trail we do, it's going to be the easiest one, and I swear to God, that was the hardest trail I had done until then. And so, what's easy, and I think that was when I related all of it back to like New Forest of Road Club and how the rides are there, because there's a clear communication what the pace is going to be, what sort of group we're expecting, and there's I think that clear communication about those things, but also the introduction part. Yeah, that's so important. Just knowing who you're riding with, I think that makes a whole lot of difference. So, even though sometimes you can't pronounce people's names, that does make a difference, because you know that person has spoken, you've heard their voice. It's not like, oh, are you a part of this group? I don't think anyone should turn up at a place, join a ride, and think, am I actually with them? Like, am I going to be left behind?
I have to ask now, this is applicable to everybody in this room, including everyone on the panel. Like, have you ever turned up to a group ride and it's been a very clearly cliquey experience? Show of hands. Hey, so it's just like pretty much all of us have been in that situation, and that's also the difference between, am I coming back to this again or not? I'm personally somebody who's still trying to get used to the idea of going on group rides, or maybe just accepting I haven't found the right one yet, or I'm not a group rider, and as I said, that's okay. Yeah. So, but it's just like, what needs to, it might sound like an odd question, but what needs to be done for this to be a less cliquey place? Because it's even when I look at some of the marketing and the advertising that surrounds like group rides that are out there, sometimes it can just look like a bros club, or like, this is not a space for you. So I don't know, I suppose that kind of feeds into some of the barriers that are in place stopping people from wanting to get involved in communities.
I think it's a top-down issue because that's a leadership problem then. Because some people want to be cliquey. They like the exclusivity. They make money off of that exclusivity. So, in a way, it's helpful because you'll see it and you'll be like, "That's not for me. Why do I want to force them to change why would I want to be a part of that?" And that's why it's really refreshing when you do see an organization or a group that are being clearly inclusive, then you see the possibility there and you're like, I can see myself being a part of this group. But I do think that's a top-down marketing thing. So if you want to become a more inclusive organization, you have to make sure you communicate that.
Just in a note, I'm going to let you continue with that as well, but this was something we were going to talk about, which was the top-down and bottom-up approach. And do you say that that's the better way for it to be done, or can that even get, I don't want to get into the sort of like bureaucracy of it, but if there are too many voices and it suddenly becomes too confusing and you're trying to organise, like, you know, or galvanise people, can that be a problem as well?
Yeah, probably. But I think it's the commitment of the group. Because so LBK runs as an unofficial worker co-op. That only works because we all agree that we're going to run that way. The minute you have one person who's like, no, I'm not cool with this, I like hierarchy, it's not going to work. So that's where if you want a bottom-up approach, you have to make sure everyone's on board with that. And again, that's clear communication, making sure people know what to expect.
I think Biola had something to add on that.
Sure, thank you. So I would say it can be a mixture of the two. So I became chair of Velocity Posse in beginning of 2020, and I was the first chair, so there'd not been a chair before. So the approach of the committee of the club had been a bottom-up approach, but then the decision was that we wanted to have more kind of clarity and a bit more accountability for different members of the committee, and that's why the role of chair was created, and I put myself forward for it, and I was very happy I got elected. Knowing I think, as Jenni highlighted, the leadership is so important, and the leadership really sets the tone. It's also, from the leader's perspective, understanding the organisation in which you're part of and you're trying to be a leader of. You know, I think for me, the best examples of great leadership has been, you know, taking and understanding and listening to what your organisation is trying to do or trying to achieve, and then understanding that and then working to think of ideas to implement that. So it's not necessarily you as a leader trying to, if you like, not even establish, but put on or force on your group, your ideas. It's more just you're trying to distill what the group wants and trying to think of ways to implement that. And I think that's where you have like a mixture of that bottom up and top down approach. Well, that's been my approach to being chair. Elle, did you have something to
No, thanks, Jools. I think that's
Thank you.
So I think this is a really important question, and it's one that I don't have an answer to. And there's a book that I listened to recently called The Authority Gap, Marianne Seacott. I think it was either Eve or Claire who recommended it to me, Nick. I can't remember which one of you. But she talks in that a lot about how sometimes women, we don't always help ourselves or the rest of our communities in the best way. And a lot of that is to do with how we're socialised, in that when young girls are often growing up, they'll have like a best friend. Whereas, you know, to be sort of very gender typical about it, boys will have many friends. And one of the disadvantages of that is it can lead to things like queen bee syndrome. And so I think it is really important, in a little bit about how Jenni was saying, like, we need to recognise that we're all a little bit racist. We need to recognise that we can all sometimes be a little bit cliquey. And sometimes that is because it's less mental energy, sometimes, to be around people who you are comfortable with and familiar with. But then also to recognise that and to think, well, how can we break that down And to almost just be constantly like listening and checking in and making sure that you have good, a diversity of leadership or visible people, so that there are people who are leading in your communities who show lots of different ways of doing things, suggest different ways about approaching different problems or situations, but it's about constantly asking those really uncomfortable questions and never thinking like, oh, we've solved inclusivity for everyone. But actually, I'm going to jump in here, and I think everybody's got these little books, little booklets in your little delicate packs. If not, if you don't have any paper, come see me, I'll rip out some pages. But I wanted to give people a little challenge over lunchtime before I hand the microphone back over, in case I don't get it again. So, I think this is if you will permit me. Lots of communities are centred around group rides, and I think having that real world community is hugely beneficial and valuable. And this is essentially just a really good opportunity for a bit of user research. So I would like people, if you have a piece of paper, or find a piece of paper, or tell me or email me, and I will come up with some way of collecting all of this. But what can we do to check in with ourselves, with our communities, with our friends, with our ride leaders, to make sure that we are building what people need and what people want? So whether that's ideas or feedback that you have around, speed or pace anxiety, it could be from a neurodiverse or sort of social anxiety perspective, it could be around those first touch points, it could be around how we make things less cliquey, or anything that I haven't mentioned that I haven't thought about because it's not something that I've got lived experience of. But if you have any ideas or feedback or things that you think would be really valuable, I would really love to collect any thoughts, questions, ideas that you have and put them together into some kind of community resource, because I think this is a really hot potato and it's something that no one person is going to solve by themselves. So yeah, people want to think about that at lunchtime and come see me later when you hand in your homework and I'll grade.
Well, that beautifully ties in with something else that I wanted to bring up in regards to allyship as well. So everyone in here has the potential or is an ally who can have the tools to help support cycling groups. So I was just saying, even just getting folks to email you things that you may have missed or things that you'll be able to do to help as well. So that was a really good example of how to give people the tools, or give allies the tools to help support cycling groups and communities. So I wondered if any of you had any thoughts on that, as well as what can be done instead of just, I don't know, just like, instead of it just being performative action that people are doing, actually going the distance and giving the time. Because the other thing that I wanted to bring into this as well is the fact that a lot of the communities that are built often relies on unpaid labour. And you've kind of all touched upon this, that it's a brilliant thing to do, to create these groups, make these spaces. It's exhausting and draining at the same time as well if you're carrying that on your shoulders. So it's a bit of a double question I'm squeezing in here, and I'm trying to do it somewhere at the time as well. But like, number one, what can we do to give allies the tools to help? And number two, how do we make these groups, or running of these groups, more sustainable? Like, the unpaid labour feels like it is a part of it that just has to happen in order for these things to get off the ground. But the burnout is real. So what can be done?
I can have a go.
Go for it.
I think on the first one with allies, we need to reach out and tell people what we need. So, for example, in our club, there's no way we would have got to that many women in the club without the support of the men. It's a whole team effort. They've led rides, they've been supportive, they've helped make it a welcoming space for people to come back to time and time again. So I think, in our particular instance, reach out and say, guys, we need you to do X, Y, Z, and just be clear about what our expectations are. I think that can help. I think on the burnout, I think share the load. I think many hands make light work, and I can't tell you the number of people in our club who have helped volunteer over the years, be that rider leading or training or, my God, helping on the board, helping on committees, etc., etc. It's yes, there's a lot of work to do, but the more people you can get involved, the less there is, and it's enjoyable for everyone.
Thank you. And just kind of jumping off the back of around volunteering and especially volunteering burnout, one of the things that we try to do within the Velocity Posse is very much focus on the ask for volunteers, because a number of people actually have a lot of willingness to give back just because they've received so much from the communities. But the question is, how much time does it take? What skills you need? The perception that you need to be an excellent cyclist to be able to be a part of the committee or to be able to help at an event, and actually being a bit clearer as kind of communities, what does volunteering look like, and be quite specific in the ask and the time taken. I think that could help with getting more people to help and, as you said, reduce that the volunteer burnout. I think a second point, which is more around allyship, is really, I kind of see allyship as kind of two parts, partly partnerships and then collaborations. So partnerships, I think it's quite important to understand, as Cheryl has said, around the asks and know what you're going to an ally to ask in terms of what you'd like to share with them or get from them. I think the second, and being specific around that, the second is around collaboration. So part of the work that an ally can do is also elevate your spaces by collaboration. And so I think those are two, in my mind, two ways in which allies can help, by giving their time, their resources, but also using their platform to basically help kind of showcase to a wide audience, an audience which is not necessarily used to or comfortable with seeing marginalised groups or different various communities. That collaboration, I think, is also really important.
Got a quick one. So, on the sort of how do we sustain this topic, one of the things that really drives me absolutely insane about the bike industry is how narrow-minded it is. If you want to sell a bike to every cis white man in the world, there is a fixed number of bicycles that you can sell. If you want to sell a bike to every person in the world, that is a much larger fixed number of bicycles that you can sell. And essentially, like, what we're doing here is, what we want to do is we want to make these transformational friendships, experiences, you know, the health benefits of exercise. We want to help lower the barriers to anyone accessing those. But and a little bit about what Jenni was saying, like the purse string holders, the people who actually have power and influence and money, they at some point need to open their eyes and reach into their pockets. Because not all of this labour needs to be unpaid. Yes, there is a certain amount of grassroots sports will always rely on volunteers. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. That's a philosophical question for another day. But a lot of these structures of power, of money, of influence are still dominated by cis white men or cis white women. And when somebody says, "Oh, do you want to sponsor my community or my collective?" Yes, they're giving you some money, or they're giving you some product. Newsflash, if they're giving you product, it's really like no skin off their, it's, they're supplying that at cost price, and it's not a huge investment from them. If they're giving you a few £100, that's not a huge investment from them. Mm-hmm. And what that is enabling them to do is to signal, "Oh, look at us, will you support this community?" Pat ourselves on the shoulder. But what are they actually doing, to change the leadership of that company? Because ultimately, every person that comes along to a ride, at some point, they're going to want to buy some new tyres, a new bicycle. And it's one thing if it's, quite often, within the bike industry, you'll get people come in and they'll work in in a customer-facing role. So it might be customer service, it might be marketing. And okay, if those people are more diverse, that's one thing. But if the people designing the products are not diverse, then they will not work for everybody. If the people deciding on the direction of the company are not diverse, then then the patterns of thought, the ways of operating are not going to change. And that matters for us as communities because we should demand more. Our stories, our lived experiences are worth more than some free, bottles of chain lube or something, And those are ours, and we can choose who to give our stories away to. So we should demand more, we should demand better, we should know the value of our experiences. And so I don't know how we organise. Yeah, you got the answer.
I don't have the answer. I would say I don't have the answer, but I would say within Velocity we are incredibly, I would say actually, I would use this word, militant about this type of stuff. So we, as Jools highlighted, the group is quite an unusual one because we are focused and very, very, very present about inclusion of women, trans people. We will absolutely go to town on the structures that be if you are going to do things which are exclusive or exclusionary to the inclusion of people. Just to say that we're very militant about this. And so when we go to make partnerships with especially commercial companies, that's one of the things that companies come to us. They go, oh, Velocity Posse, you have quite a good name. You're a small group, but you're very loud. You're very present on Instagram. You have a huge following. Let's have a piece of that. And we are extremely militant about not accepting. And it's so it could be, people will say, it's to your detriment. You don't get free money. You don't get the free bikes. You don't get free helmets. Thank you very much. We're okay to pass up on that because ultimately it's about the sanctity of our groups and our communities, the things that we work so hard to try and build, then to try and sell out for some bikes, some tyres or some wheels is not something that we're going to do. So I think to your point, Elle, it's really important when these companies come to you, and they will come to especially communities which are doing great work, and they will say to you, we've got money, we've got this. Well, what else are you bringing? What changes are you doing in your company? What changes are you doing in the industry? Are you actually challenging other members of your industry? Because you're at that top table. You're at that top table when you could be making differences. And if you're just sitting there and just saying, sorry, I'm not my little friend.
It's not about it just being when a company comes to you for it to be transactional. It's about what you were all talking about before, that it's the collaborations and partnerships that you need to be working on with these companies, and it's not just about splashing the cash or some kit. So that's a fair point.
Exactly.
Fair
I'm
point.
going to pass the mic on because I'm
wondering, are we... that needs the wrap up. So, can I just ask one very quick question to put you on the spot, very, very quickly, because I want to leave this on a high. Do you have one positive word that you can give to me and give to our dear audience as well in regards to the positives of creating cycling groups and communities? So, one joyful thing each that's come out of doing it.
I can go first. I would say the one joyful thing is being in this room, making friendships and making connections. I think that's the beauty of it.
Fun. It's actually so much fun to go to board meetings and hang out with people I consider friends and try and come up with new ideas about how we're going to make it better.
My one word is empowerment, because I think that creates change. And
my thing's going to be self-acceptance, and it's learning that actually you are pretty damn good as you are. Don't change for anything.
My word is belongingness and feeling like you're part of something big, and you've got your people out there. Like, I live in the other end of the country now from New Forest Off-Road Club, but I would still say I'm very much a part of New Forest Off-Road Club. And that feeling of belongingness, I think that's what it's about.
Amazing.
I'm sure you'll join me in giving a massive round of applause to the incredible women. Q&A, but there is a lunch break coming up, so you will be able to, hopefully, if you're up for it, speaking to people from the audience, panel, vice versa, to have a chat. But thank you so much for your time and being part of this with us today. So thank you kindly.
Thank you, Jools.